When I was growing up in Bakersfield, my favorite thing in all the world was to go to the movies on Saturday afternoons for the chapter plays.
Cliffhangers.
I know that, Mr. Man. They also call them serials. I'm not stupid, you know. Anyway, my favorite was Rocket Man. And once it was a no-brakes chapter. And the bad guys stuck him in a car on a mountain road and knocked him out and welded the doors shut and tore out the brakes and started him to his death. And he woke up and tried to steer and tried to get out, but the car went off a cliff before he could escape. And it crashed and burned, and I was so upset and excited. And the next week, you better believe I was first in line. And they always start with the end of the last week. And there was Rocket Man trying to get out. And here comes the cliff. And just before the car went off the cliff, he jumped free. And all the kids cheered. But I didn't cheer. I stood right up and started shouting, "This isn't what happened last week! Have you all got amnesia? They just cheated us! This isn't fair! He didn't get out of the cock-a-doodie car!"
That the only thing we have to fear is itself.
No. Be afraid. Be very afraid.
There's nothing to fear except God. Whatever that means to you.
Do I look like someone who cares what God thinks? Why do I say this? Because we got Holy Ghost power!
You're listening to The Fear of God, a podcast exploring the intersection between Christianity and the horror genre.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Fear of God. This is, in fact, episode 58. Even I can't believe how far we've come here. We are in the middle of an amazing series. Technically not even really the middle yet. We are trekking our way through, and next week we'll be at the middle of our current series, lovingly titled #I Love the 90s, crowdsourced content on these episodes. Speaking to you right now is one of your normal hosts, whatever you want to call me, Nathan Rouse. Usually with me is just longtime friend of a couple of decades at this point, which is awesome and yet a little sad at the same time. Not that we've been friends that long, but that, you know, I'm getting old, y'all. And it's both of our birthday months as well. So typically with me is just fellow birthday month partner Reed Lackey, but he was here a minute ago and he said something about needing to look up spam meatloaf recipes, just something about just giving it that little extra zip, you know? I mean, I don't know. Maybe he'll surprise us all with just, you know, he'll throw that up on Pinterest and we'll see what comes of that recipe. While he's away, I did want to just take a minute though and share a little secret with you guys. So right now we're in the thick, as I mentioned, of #I Love the 90s. Next month, I got to tell this stuff fast before he gets back. Next month we are trekking through #Stranger Thingsgiving. I want to reveal right now what we're going to be doing in December. I'm excited about this. I hope you guys are excited about these series because we really, and honestly, it doesn't matter a ton if you aren't excited about it because we are very excited about it. But in December, we are going to be doing a series called #A Scary Burton Christmas. In case it's unclear, we will be covering some of the works of Mr. Tim Burton. And I'm really looking forward to that. We won't reveal exactly what that lineup is just yet. So a little bit of a teaser there. And, you know, just wanted to let you go. Reed! Oh!
Hi!
Don't tell him what I said, guys. Welcome back, man.
How's it going?
I'm good. Nothing
to see here?
Going on.
Oh, okay.
Just hanging out with everybody.
Oh, awesome.
I
made you some spam meat. So, it's my special meatloaf.
Some spam meat or some spam meatloaf?
Meatloaf.
Okay.
Yeah. It's, some spam meatloaf and, I really like it. I think it turned out well this time. Yeah. I added some, crumbled up ramen noodles in it this time. And it turned out better than it did the last 3 times, you know, so I don't think I'm going to throw up this time. It's really going to be good.
Okay, well, good. And I think it goes nice with just a glass of red wine. I mean, you know,
Yes. Dom Perignon, please. Dom Perignon.
Yeah, no, Dom Perignon, I think, is
Dom
what
Perignon,
it's called.
That's the one.
Yeah, right. Reed, welcome, my friend.
Hi, how's it going?
I was reminding everybody that we are working on hashtag I Love the 90s. Last week we discussed, for myself, a rather surprisingly strong entry into that 90s horror canon, the Blair Witch Project. So that was a lot of fun. I don't want to reveal just yet what we're talking about today, because there are no context clues whatsoever.
No, not at all.
But I did want us to, much like we did last week, if you read, I don't know if you remember this because you've got a lot on your plate, spam meatloaf being one of them, or if the audience remembered this, we kind of crowdsourced this series. Starting back in July, we began polling our listeners to see what would ultimately be the top 100 horror movies from 1990 to 1999.
That's right.
We do have that list. It is complete. It is intact. It is in a vault on Reed's Dropbox. So we'll try to figure out if we're going to do anything different with this. But I do know at the end of the series we will release all 100 and show you guys what you all voted on. Specifically, we will be kind of bullet pointing the top 50, kind of 10 at a time, for the 5 weeks of October. Last week we covered entries 50 through 41.
I hate math too.
Descending math is always going to be a trouble spot for us theater people. This week we are going to be bullet pointing numbers 40 through 31.
Yes.
Let's just, if it's okay with you, let's just jump right in and see what the people had to say.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
why don't you start?
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, your number 40 for your favorite films of the 1990s is a film that I love. I think it's really fun, and I think it's really great. You selected as number 40, Tales from the Hood, directed by Rusty Cundiff, if I'm saying his name correctly, which maybe I'm not, but it is an anthology film. It is a film that is made up of several loosely connected stories, all with what I will call an urban theme. It's basically Tales from the Crypt, but of course it's called Tales from the Hood. Have you ever heard of this movie?
I'm pretty sure I've heard of it, but I have not seen it.
This movie is bonkers, and it's great. It's so. There's gonna be
a lot of questions answered that way in the coming weeks, where I say I have heard of it, but I have not seen it. I think that's going to happen more than it's not.
Well, as we mentioned,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, as we mentioned last week, really all 100 of these that we haven't already talked about is fodder for eventual coverage, and I think Tales from the Hood is right up there because, man, I love it. It's great. I would love us to make.
I can't wait to let everybody know that The Dentist made the top 10. But as for movies, it was a surprise. It was a dark horse, that one. As for number 39, I have seen this.
Nice.
And that would be Stephen King's The Stand.
Yes.
Directed by Mick Garris, which in this case, to nuance this a little bit, was the TV miniseries starring Gary Sinise.
Exactly.
And Dauber from Coach.
Right? Yes. He's definitely in there.
And Rob Lowe, right?
Rob Lowe's in it. Yeah, he is. It has Molly Ringwald's in it. I mean, it's got a lot of...
Yes, Molly Ringwald. That's what I was
got a lot of 80s stars sort of making...
And Parker Lewis.
Parker Lewis can't lose.
In that role.
Yes, he's in it. It's got a lot of big stars from the 80s making sort of not quite a comeback. I wouldn't call it a comeback. But
they'd been there for years.
Right. I'm glad you're my friend. But I personally I do really enjoy The Stand, as we talked about 2 weeks ago with Stephen King's It, the 90 miniseries. Time has not been as kind to it. Nostalgia is sort of more my reasons for enjoying it, but I remember loving it when I first saw it. And obviously it still holds up for some people because it's number 39 in the list. But it's good. It's fun. It's enjoyable.
they've been like so many of these King properties, though. Maybe we are getting at peak King. Maybe something actual will happen, but they've been flirting with a new production of The Stand for a number of years. In fact, Affleck sort of rumored to be attached in some sort of directorial capacity, though I don't know if that's a couple years gone now.
Yeah, I think so.
I would not want this to be done in a feature format. Like, you just...
Right.
It's not going to work. It's not going to happen.
No.
So hopefully if they do tackle it, it'll be in the... Even revisiting the sort of maxi series kind of premium TV type of format.
A Netflix or an HBO or something like that. That's definitely the format that it needs to be in. But enough about The Stand. Let's drift on down the line to number 38. So number 38 is a film that I was actually surprised is as low as it was in the list. I'm not disappointed by that, but I was expecting, given the nomination love for it, that it would be a lot higher in the list. Number 38 is directed by Antonio Bird, Ravenous, starring Guy Pearce. This is a fascinating, interesting, unique, and very inventive film. Have you ever heard of it? I know you haven't seen it. Have you ever heard of it? That's not a dig.
Here's a variation. I might have heard of it. I've not seen it.
But I'm not going to tell you anything about it except that it deals...
I get the impression somebody in it is hungry.
Yes, and hungry for human flesh. But
I figured.
But it's a film that is I just don't want to say too much more about it. It's a period piece, deals in a sort of offbeat way with a cannibalism thing, but I don't even want to say too much more about that because you should just see it at some point. It's on Netflix right now. You should definitely check it out. And listeners have voted.
See you guys in a little while. I'll be back.
I'll wait here.
Right. For number 37, Reed. Number 37 on the list of the top 100 horror films of the 1990s is Cube, directed by Vincenzo Natali, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't seen this, but if the trailer rings out, is about a box, and there's a guy named Richard, and he gets in it. And SNL would later spoof it.
That is not... Wow. That is not... No. At first I was like, boxing with Rich... Oh no.
One.
That's hysterical.
Box. And then you watch Cube.
Oh, no.
But no, I've really not seen it.
I'm shocked. No, sincerely, I was surprised that this made it as high as it did, because this is an independent thriller. It's pretty... it's an escape thriller, and at its heart, it's just essentially, people are in a scenario that they know is deadly, and they're trying to get out of it. It's got some science fiction elements. It obviously has some horror elements, but it's offbeat, and I was surprised that it got as much affection and love as it did. It did get nominated by a few different people, but to make it at number 37 in the list is pretty substantive. I have not seen it in a number of years. I remember liking it a lot when I saw it, but it has been a long time. I was just actually really kind of surprised. It made me want to revisit it just to check out why it resonated with so many different people. But again, we're clipping at a brisk pace because we have another film, a big film, to have a big conversation about. So going right along to number 36 is a film that hit my radar before #ILoveThe90s, and I had not revisited it in a long time. I still haven't revisited it, but it was on my sort of to be watched soon list. It is directed by Andrew Fleming, The Craft. It is about 4 witches in a Catholic high school. Let's just leave it there.
All right.
But have you? So no. But seriously, it's been so long since I saw this movie.
No, because you were about to ask me. No, I haven't. I haven't seen it.
This was the other 1996 Neve Campbell movie, because the main 1996
the other
Neve
one was
Campbell movie,
Where the Wild Things Are, right?
That's the one. Except that it's actually just Wild Things, and was much later.
And that was like Let the Wild Rumpus Start. That's that movie.
Yes, it is. Our friends, the body and the blood, are not here anymore, so we can't dredge down that path.
Right. Yeah.
No. And
I'll do their work for them.
In all seriousness, it's been a long time since I've seen it, but I've been meaning to revisit this film for some time, and now maybe there's an excuse to, because listeners voted it as number 36. So, and it's on Netflix right now. So I'm without excuse. I have to check this film out and see why the listeners resonated with it so strongly.
Awesome. Well, number 35 is a movie titled The Prophecy. Which, if I had to guess, has something to do with a prophecy. And it is directed by Gregory Wyden, and it stars Christopher Walken, Casey Jones, and Aragorn of Arathorn. So,
as Lucifer himself. And so I feel the need to apologize to listeners, because listeners voted for each and every one of these. I have seen most of the movies on the list, but a lot of them not recently. I'm going to spend a few seconds talking about the ones that are big deals to me, of which The Prophecy is. The Prophecy is a great... I love The Prophecy. It features... Christopher Walken plays the angel Gabriel, and in the movie, he has rebelled against God. So he comes down, and he's sort of bringing about the apocalypse, and the humans who are trying to stop him have to call in Lucifer to stop him. That's
intense.
It's a really cool movie, and I will say this in all seriousness, is kind of, in my estimation, sort of responsible for making Christopher Walken, this combined with his handful of SNL sketches, are responsible for making Christopher Walken the pop culture figure that he is today. Prior to that, he was simply an actor, an Academy Award-winning actor. Yeah, but in terms of a pop culture figure, he didn't really achieve that status, if my memory serves me correctly, until The Prophecy came out, and about that same time he was on SNL with those iconic, cowbell sketches, etc. But The Prophecy was like, some of Christopher Walken's most noteworthy quirks, his little, like the way he carries himself and everything, all come in large part from his performance in this film. And I love it. I'd love for you to see it sometime, to let me know.
Remember too, I mean, again, I don't know when The Prophecy came out, but he was also in Pulp Fiction, which was 94. So I don't know.
Oh, yeah. This was right after it. This was 95.
Oh, okay.
But yeah.
Oh, you're next. Sorry, I was about to take your.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Yeah, I talked so darn much about the movie. But, okay, so number 34, John Carpenter makes yet another appearance with a film that is, I think, really, really great and deserves to be in this list, maybe even slightly higher, but it is In the Mouth of Madness, starring Sam Neill, about the end of the world in book form. This is a fantastic movie. We almost covered it last October for our Carpenter profile. I think it's likely that we may revisit this again at some point soon, but I really love In the Mouth of Madness. I think it's a great, great movie.
Number 33 would be Kronos, directed by Mr. Guillermo del Toro.
Oh man, Kronos is fantastic. I mean, early Guillermo del Toro is ripe for your discovery, because you've seen Pan's Labyrinth, and
sure.
Have you seen anything else? Like, have you seen Devil's Backbone? You haven't seen this. Have you seen any of those others? Oh man, we should at some point do a series on Guillermo del Toro, so that there's an excuse for you to see these films. Kronos is great. Devil's Backbone is great. This is a really, really strong film. It's obviously it's foreign language. It's in Spanish. But yeah, Kronos is a great, great movie. It's got it's kind of a vampiric quality to it. It's not quite about vampires. You'd kind of have to see it. It's as you would expect from Guillermo del Toro. It's a little offbeat and pretty different, but it's great. It's really, really great. 32. Man, I was excited that this made it in. Directed by Steve Miner. Halloween H2O, also known as Halloween Water. This is without a doubt my favorite of the Halloween sequels up to this date. It featured the return of Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode, and she badly wanted John Carpenter to direct this, but there's a story that we covered last October when we talked about it. They wouldn't accept Carpenter's request for fee, and Steve Miner got directorial duties, but I still think this film is really solid, and it's one of my favorite of the sequels, and I'm so excited that not only is John Carpenter back involved with the upcoming Halloween, not only is he producing it, not only is he possibly scoring it, but they did announce that officially Jamie Lee Curtis is returning as Laurie Strode for the new Halloween movie that's coming out next year. And I am so thrilled. I'm so excited.
That's next year?
That's next year. Yeah. I am so excited.
I was because of the fear of God. I saw a lot of the buzz about her being attached to it.
Yeah.
And I just presumed it was coming out, like this month. And so I was like, I'm going to go see that now.
No.
So fill in the gaps for the Halloween ignorant, of which, of course, I'm probably the only one. Are there Halloween films post H2O?
Yes, unfortunately there are. There was, there's Halloween Resurrection, which actually featured, spoiler alert for Halloween Resurrection, the first 10 minutes of it, Jamie Lee Curtis agreed to come back only if they agreed to kill her. So in the first 10 minutes, she comes back as Laurie Strode and dies. And then it's a stupid movie that follows that. And then Rob Zombie made his 2 Halloween films, and then the series has largely been sort of debunked, or defunct, I should say, up to that point. But Carpenter's willingness to get re-involved is what has brought everything back to fruition.
Right.
So what they have said about this new film, obviously Jamie Lee Curtis is returning as Laurie Strode. What they have said about this new film is that it is ignoring every bit of Halloween chronology past the first sequel. So Halloween 1, Halloween 2, and then this new film is going to ignore, it makes me sad, it's even ignoring H2O. Like, it's ignoring everything following Halloween 2. So, but yeah, I'm curious to see.
So did he direct 2?
He did not direct 2. He only directed the first one, but he did produce 2. He did produce Halloween 2. And but I'm excited to see where they could take the story from now, because it's got Carpenter's blessing on it and it's got Carpenter's involvement in it. So that's enough at this point for me to want to see it. And then Jamie Lee Curtis back. I mean, yeah, there's no way I won't be there opening night. It's great. I'm so excited.
With your cup of Activia, right?
Yes. Hey, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of Jamie Lee Curtis. Okay.
I'm not knocking Jamie Lee. I am not knocking Jamie Lee Curtis. So very last on our rundown here. So this has been numbers 40 through 31 in the top 50 horror movies from the 1990s. Number 31, also what I sometimes get accused of being would be The Devil's Advocate, directed by Taylor Hackford. This is with Al Pacino, Keanu, I know Kung Fu Reeves, and Charlize Mr. F. Theron. You like that? You like how I did all that? That was really just all in the moment. That was all in the moment.
I love it. Yeah, it's great.
I have seen this one. I have seen it.
Oh, tell me what you think about it.
Quite a while. Not much. It's pretty lost to memory. So yeah, I've seen it though. So there's that.
I actually really like its sort of gothic qualities. I feel like it's I've seen it a couple of times, and I feel like it's got a good atmosphere to it. Al Pacino, I mean, you've got Al Pacino pairing up against Keanu Reeves, so guess who steals every scene? So yeah, it's
Keanu all the way down the line.
Absolutely. So yeah, but it's a film that I really enjoy. I liked it a lot. It wouldn't have landed like 31 for me if I was making a personalized list, but I definitely understand why it's here, and I think it deserves its place. It's a really strong entry. So listeners, good job, listeners. That was your 40 through 31 of your listener-voted hashtag I Love the 90s. If you disagree with any of the placements or you wish they were different, then, well, yeah, that's how the votes came out. You have only yourselves to blame. Let me see how many times I can do that and just alienate our audience even more.
Well, I mean, there's 5 weeks in October, so I think you'll be able to work it in somehow.
Yeah.
At least 5 times.
At least 5 times. But as we did last week, we are going to be having a more extended conversation about a film that is in your top 10. As we did last week, we're not going to tell you where it is until the final week of hashtag I Love the 90s, but this film that we're talking about today, which I'll let Nathan sort of dive into what it is, made your top 10. So, Nathan,
Reed,
tell us what we're talking about today.
Well, we are talking about a film I can only describe as, I had seen it before and I thought it was a little piece of cockadoodie then. But I really, it really confirmed for me what a dirty bird you are for suggesting this whole thing. We are in fact talking about, Stephen King's, the adaptation of Stephen King's work directed by Rob Reiner, Misery.
Yes.
Starring Kathy Bates. What a movie. So Reed, I've got a question for you, to kind of kick off the Misery conversation. You know that old game, Would You Rather? You know, would you rather
yes, I do.
Kick a puppy or jump off a bridge or something. You know, that old. Hey, this is a show about horror stuff. So, in the spirit of that, would you rather?
Oh no!
I want you to think about this for a minute.
This is going to be.
Would you rather die in a car accident in the snow, or get saved by Annie Wilkes?
There's no question. Like, yeah. I believe in Jesus. I believe in heaven. Like, kill me in the car accident and put me out of my misery. Like, yeah, put me out of my misery. Literally. I am definitely a car wreck all the way.
But even if she's your number one fan, I mean,
like, no.
That's an opportunity.
That's fan service I don't need. Like, no.
Sure.
And you know what's funny is, man, Annie Wilkes is like she's a nightmare scenario. Like, it's one of the things where she's probably one of Stephen King's greatest villainous creations. I mean, like, yes, Pennywise is freaky. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. Yes, Pennywise is horrifying, but Annie Wilkes is freaking possible. Like,
right,
right. It's one of those things where I think that's why it's so terrifying. Like, his supernatural elements are something that's we've gone back and forth on our affection or our love for, but yeah, Annie Wilkes is entirely possible, and that makes her all the more terrifying as a result. I do want to mention one note before we get too deep into it, because we haven't really addressed this yet. So up until this point, up until this film, we have only covered the works of Stephen King in our Quarterly King series. So, in case listeners were wondering, that Quarterly King series is not going away. We debated quite heavily about whether or not to cover Misery or one of the other films from the top 10. Where we kind of landed was just in recognizing that, A, Misery is just so good. It's such a great film. I love it. B, it is in your top 10, so it deserved its place in this series, but then also C, it is so 1990s. Like, this is such a film that represents the stylistic themes, the trends, the structural stylings of the 1990s. So it was almost essential that we talk about this film in this series. We're not abandoning the Quarterly Kings by any stretch. We're just covering Misery a little early. But all of that having been said, how many times had you seen this? I know you'd seen it before this particular viewing.
This would be the second time. So,
okay.
And actually, I actually have not read this book, so it would be one I would enjoy getting to at some point.
Yeah, you really should. This is one of my favorite of Stephen King books, because I've mentioned a time or two on social media and in conversation that one of the things you and I think both agree on is that as much as we love Stephen King's writing, and as much as we love his stories and virtually find everything that he writes at least enjoyable to a degree, he struggles with his endings. So his endings are usually either a little flat or a little complicated, or not quite the punch that you would want, but the journey getting there is so great, it usually doesn't matter. Misery is on a short list of maybe half a dozen to 10 books that I consider to have a perfect ending. I think Misery has an absolutely perfect ending. I think it is really strong.
Take a minute. How does it sync up with the book? I mean, with the movie?
Almost verbatim.
Oh, really?
Yeah, almost verbatim. Yeah. The movie ends exactly the same way that the book ends, and I think it's a perfect culmination.
As in with him seeing her visions of her. Is that what are you referring to?
Oh, yes, yeah. Well, all of it. The way that the stuff in the house ends with him burning the book and attacking her and all of that kind of stuff, and then him surviving. The one thing that the movie leaves out. Well, no, it doesn't quite leave it out. The book ends on a much more. Man, you haven't read it, so I feel bad like spoiling this moment for you.
It's all good.
But the last few pages of the book are actually a little emotional, because he became an alcoholic coming out of the experience with Annie Wilkes. Paul Sheldon had become an alcoholic, and so then he struggled to write. He suffered from years of writer's block after his experience with Annie Wilkes. So the book ends with him finding that muse again, and as he is starting to type the book that she made him burn, he's weeping. So tears going down his face as he's writing again. And it's kind of, a lovely sort of poignant moment that he's finally free and finally whole. And so, yeah, it's a really satisfying book. The only caveat that I put to the experience of reading the book is that the book he writes for her, and King's done this a couple of times, that book is inside the book. So you do read sections of the book that he is writing for her, and that detracts from the plot a little bit. Well, a lot, actually, because it's this whole subset thing. But I would even recommend, some people are going to consider this sacrilege, I would even recommend if you read the book, you can just skip those parts. You can just glide right over the parts of the book within a book.
But then how will we know how misery returns?
I know, right? Exactly.
I know.
But and if Stephen King, he's not going to, but if he were ever listen to this, he would disavow it and we would get hate mail from it. But in my opinion, you can skip over those parts of the story within the story, but the story around it is so tight and so strong and so great. Even with the story within the story, the book's only a little over 300 pages, so it's a very quick read.
It's for him.
Yeah, for him. But yeah, it's really strong. I recommend anybody check out the book. Even if you've seen the film, it's really, really good. So I have a couple of little trivial bits here, but I don't know. You've been doing some research on me lately. Do you have any trivial bits to share, or maybe something will come to you as we?
I feel negligent. This is actually one of the few. I think I actually forgot to do some backstory on because she's so strong. Because the production, Rob Reiner, like there's such a weight attached to it.
Sure.
I didn't. So tell me, fill me in, Reed.
All right, no problem. So as I mentioned before, the film is very of the 90s, stylistically, tonally, visually. It's in my opinion, a quintessential example of the American filmmaking style of the 1990s. Those are characterized by, a sweeping orchestra score, brightly framed cinematography, and a very firmly structured narrative style. I think this is speculation on my part, but I think that because home viewing was as popular as it was in the 90s, it had kind of reached the zenith.
Sure.
Because it had reached its zenith, so many filmmakers were styling towards the home viewing experience, and so that's how a lot of the films from the 90s feel. They feel sort of ready for the home viewing experience, and Misery definitely falls into that category, even though that's not to say that they're not cinematic in nature, but they do sort of feel like the kind of thing that you could watch at home. One thing that I think is noteworthy is that it's thus far the only Stephen King adaptation to receive an Academy Award. It's the only one. Hundreds of adaptations. It's the only one to receive an Academy Award. We'll get into that in likes, dislikes, I'm sure.
But are you sure Dreamcatcher didn't? I'm totally joking. Dreamcatcher's a terrible movie. I was totally kidding. I done it.
Yes, Dreamcatcher is an abomination. But
it's a pretty good book, though, but terrible movie.
Agree with everything you just said. But yeah, so far it's not the only one to be nominated. Several of his adaptations have been nominated, sometimes for heavy-hitting awards, but this is the only one to actually receive one for Kathy Bates, which I'm sure we'll get into for likes, dislikes. Although, interestingly enough, okay, so yeah, there's a small little connection. I've been watching a lot of the Dick Van Dyke Show, just because I love it and I miss Mary Tyler Moore, who has passed away earlier this year. So I've been watching a lot of it. It was the brainchild of Carl Reiner, who is Rob Reiner's dad. And actually, Mary Tyler Moore campaigned for the part of Annie Wilkes. She wanted it. What an interesting and different film that would have been. But there was something that I don't know if Stephen King had squashed it or if it just didn't quite work out, but Stephen King did say of some of the actresses who were vying for it, he was like, Annie Wilkes, by nature of who she is, can't be a petite figure, and I don't just mean by like physical appearance. I mean like she can't be somebody who
be an
feels,
ingenue.
Yes,
right.
It's got to be somebody who can really charismatically fill a room. Can somebody who can really just steal the scene, which Kathy Bates does so wonderfully with her performance. So he said she had to be a very big presence and had to really be able to devote a lot to, because she had to feel like she could overpower Paul Sheldon as a person,
right.
It's funny because even as I say this, I don't want any of this to come off disrespectfully. It's kind of necessary to the story that she be a very substantial presence in the room. And one thing that I did find kind of interesting, diverting from that a little bit, after more than 2 decades of radio silence on the subject and constantly being asked about it, King finally admitted that the book was a metaphorical exploration of his substance abuse. He had been asked about it for many, many years, and he finally admitted that Annie Wilkes is the personification of the drugs he struggled for so many years to overcome, and that she represented his many failed attempts to escape. And then that's another reason why I find the ending of the book to be so beautiful, is because then when Paul Sheldon is writing again, that definitely represented a liberation, a freedom for King. He's been pretty candidly open about his substance abuse and his struggles there, but especially in the last few years, he's been more candid about some of the behind-the-scenes stuff. One of the more sadder notes is that he says he has no memory of writing the book Cujo, which I find really sad. But yeah, so Annie Wilkes is kind of the embodiment of that. Her just overpowering presence, her constant being ahead of Paul Sheldon, the obsessiveness with it, and of course she represents all of his crazy fans, which he has in abundance. But that's really all that I had in terms of trivial bits. I know that's quite a bit, but there's a lot to like and dislike about this film. I've been talking a while. Why don't you give me some of your...
There's not a lot to dislike about this film.
I mean likes, dislikes. I mostly mean likes.
Yeah. I love Richard Farnsworth.
Oh, he's so great.
It made me go, this is like such a random aside. So I referenced months ago on the podcast trying to watch the Netflix Anne of Green Gables with my kids. And,
right.
And what a sort of misfire that was. Pet mice and all. And, and seeing Richard Farnsworth just made me real warm and fuzzy for Matthew Cuthbert. Yeah. And it turns out Sullivan Entertainment, you can't download, or iTunes does not carry any of those Anne movies, but Sullivan Entertainment has their own streaming service that's just for their material, and you can join it and like purchase or rent through them. So I haven't done that yet. But it made me really happy because for super nerds like me who don't have like physical DVD anymore, I really wanted some means to share that with my kids. So Richard Farnsworth for the win.
Yes,
or
absolutely.
For the shotgun blast to the back of the gut.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So I love him. I mean, I'm sure many lines of text have been written about Kathy Bates' performance in this. Like she's unreal.
She's genius. In it. Yeah, she really is.
What I wrote down is like, she is so good at not, and in quotes here, acting crazy with 3 exclamation points. Like she just does not, she doesn't do it. She is just this person. And
yes.
It is in itself terrifying. Even those moments when she explodes verbally, like it doesn't feel like a different character.
No, it comes from a very organic place. Absolutely.
Yeah, it doesn't feel put on. It doesn't feel, oh, watch her chew the scenery and oh, wasn't she so good? It is a stellar performance.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I feel like, and all I wrote down was just Kathy, period, Bates, period. Right. She owns this movie. I mean, and we alluded to it earlier. If listeners don't know or haven't picked up on it, the Academy Award that this won is she won for Best Actress. It is, it is a performance that is staggering. It is really consistent. It is entirely believable. It is terrifying where it needs to be. It is nuanced and layered and tragic. And yes, it is everything you would need for this role to be. I did make a note. I said she and John Goodman from Cloverfield Lane should get married and be the new American Gothic poster.
Wow. That's hilarious.
Her with her little butcher knife and him with his glove and his acid tub.
Wow.
Yes, they should just be the new American Gothic poster. Yes.
Tell me, so in the book, something I wrote down that I do love about the movie, but I don't know if this is the same way in the book. I kind of hope it is, but I love that the movie, it never turns overtly sexual. You know what I mean?
No, exactly. Yes.
And I honestly think that makes it even scarier because I feel like that's such an easy narrative choice to go for. You know what I mean? Like,
of course.
You could so easily just be like, oh, and then at this point in the movie, she comes onto him and suddenly it's just whole real gross, icky thing. Right. But it never goes that route. And it almost, because of that, makes it even more terrifying. I don't know why.
Oh yeah. And that's one thing that I really appreciate because the book toys with it a bit more than the movie does, but the book doesn't, by my memory, the book doesn't do that either. Like it's very much, she is enamored with him, obviously, in love with him, obviously, but it doesn't ever really go there. And
right.
And that's kind of refreshing to think about the fact that it doesn't really go there because she's got him prisoner. Like
right.
Easily could have, but doesn't. And I think it's a stronger book for that. One of the things that I'll say, kind of talking about that, but in general, overall, despite the violence, the film, and I think the book as well, but the film definitely is. I consider it to be actually one of the most approachable of Stephen King's works. Like I
can see that.
It's just very simply entertaining. And it's a very the movie. So let me talk specifically about the movie. The movie is just this very straightforward popcorn thriller. Nearly every element works. I remember thinking as I was watching this, and I think this is Rob Reiner's real skill as a director, is he just knows how to make a film that a wide popular audience is going to absorb and just sort of go with the flow with. And is very accessible, is engaging on nearly every level. Every element works. Like I mentioned, it's despite the dark story, the dark narrative story, like it's very brightly lit. Its cinematography is pretty bright.
Sure.
There's some, dare I say, picturesque, inviting scenes.
And it's hysterical.
Yes. Talk about that because it's so.
Well, funny. To kind of follow your litany of praise for Rob Reiner. I mean, for a movie that is genuinely horrific, like this wrong place, wrong time kind of scenario, the comedy is pitch perfect. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
I remember the first time I saw it and him typing the F-bomb over and over on the typewriter is hysterical.
Yes.
Him giving her the bird when she waves to him all affectionately. Oh, it's just hysterical.
And doesn't she, in that moment, like, oh, you're such a kidder.
Yeah. I mean, her line deliveries are just expert. I mean, it is a masterclass in just, being able to deliver comedic lines organically and just make them sink home.
Well, and you mentioned, if you weren't already going to mention this again, you teased that I was off making spam meatloaf. That they don't wink at the audience at all during that moment. They don't. Nobody turns. There's no gaff. There's no James Caan turning to the camera like waka waka. Like it's just she's just like, oh yeah, I put spam in it. It gives it that extra zip, and then it's just like the moment is just there.
Yep.
It's really great.
And part of it is because his character really does serve, while I agree with you, he doesn't go over the top and it's not meant to be. He really is kind of the eyes of the audience on her,
absolutely.
Really kind of commentary and that sort of thing. Another bit of comedic business that I find hysterical, just because it seems so Looney Tunes, actual cartoon Looney Tunes, is when, Buster, Richard Farnsworth, and she are squaring off in the hallway. Down the hall from each other. Just this triple take of it's so funny.
She ducks away, the backs right back in, and he's like, what?
Yeah.
What? It's really, really great. And I think that is, the humor is attributable to why I think the film is so endearing and enduring, is that it does have those elements, and I think that's something that, again, Rob Reiner just has instinctive as a director, that he knows what an audience is going to connect with and wraps the tissues for us. I will say two moments that are devastating for me. So they wouldn't be dislikes because they are necessary for the film. They work really well. They just break my heart. The first that I'll mention is just Buster's death. Absolutely breaks my heart because, like we've already said, it's Richard Farnsworth. How can you not love that guy? I know.
He's
just so eminently lovable. And so when he goes out, when he dies, it is just heartbreaking. But it's something that King does often. Like, I'm thinking about it, and he has at least a handful of books where you have the guy who you as the audience think is going to show up and save the day. Like, he's going to show up, he's going to figure everything out, now everything's going to be fine. King often has them show up only to get taken out. Like, only to get killed.
Right.
And the other most overt example I can think of is The Shining with Halloran. Halloran doesn't die in that book, but he shows up only to just get completely taken out. But he dies in the movie, though. Axe to the chest will do it every time. The other thing that I was going to say is the scene where Annie makes Paul burn Untitled.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's rough.
As a writer, you as a creative, I know you understand this as well. As a writer, I could not feel that moment. Of like, I have just, there's no other copy of this. There's nothing else. I have put all my time, blood, sweat, imagination, effort into this, and now I've got to burn it, and it's going to be gone forever because this crazy woman has this obsession with me. It's devastating. It's a really heartbreaking. But again, as I said, necessary for the film, necessary for the story, just breaks my heart.
But see, I think what's fascinating about both of those elements is, as cutting as they are, so many movies, so many stories we watch, and we just kind of glide through the experience of watching it because it's all plot and it's all just, this has to happen so the Transformers can save Earth the 50th time and blah, blah, blah. It's just, the stakes don't feel real. And both of those moments, why they land so well is because they're utterly and absolutely rooted in those characters. I mean, the moment when she is encouraging him to do that, he's so good at playing the poker face, but you see it. I mean, he is devastated and like angling for any purchase he can find to sort of wriggle out of this, and it's just not there to be found.
Right. Absolutely.
And I think what's so heartrending about Buster's passing, one, and I am enough of a King reader to know, don't get too attached to characters, but
that's true.
But to your point about this being a Rob Reiner feature, like, it is accessible. It is a very broad or meant to have sort of broad accessibility. And so that on a pure technical level, it feels even more of a loss when you lose Buster. But also, like, they do such a good job. His relationship with the wife is so excellent and lovely. Yeah. And so, like, that is one of few, off the top of my head, in this immediate moment, I can't think of a character death. Honestly, what just came to me was Boromir, but even that has resonance, and he gets a send-off, and the story is allowed to proceed due to his contributions to it. Like, when Richard Farnsworth dies, when Buster dies, like, you're not allowed a moment to breathe and kind of grieve a little bit, but you feel it. Right. And that's what's really powerful about that moment. You're like, it's this very real, visceral feeling that even knowing it was coming the second time, I just kind of have to shut my emotional center off a little bit so that I just know, okay, I mean, we're not going to get any sort of resolution to him. So I know that. So it just happens. And, poor cold one out for Buster.
For old Buster. Well, have you heard, I'm just going to ruin the whole book for you. You know that that's different in the book. No,
I don't.
The death is different in the book. So do you want me to tell you?
Yeah, sure.
In the book, very similarly, he leaves the house, and then in the book, Paul Sheldon like chucks an ashtray out the window. And when he chucks an ashtray out the window, that's what gets the cop's attention. Cop turns around, she's right there, stabs him, and when she stabs him, he goes down and he's immobilized, and the woman runs over him with a lawnmower.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Jeez.
But here's what's so the reason Rob Reiner changed it was not just for, like, I can't even imagine like a character on screen getting run over by lawnmower. But the reason he changed it is on record as saying he thought it would look silly and people would laugh at it. And I'm like,
I can see that. It's too much. Yeah.
That it's like too over the top. But as it is, to your point, like Buster, you think he's about to save the day. You're like, oh man, he's right there. You're gonna save the day, and then bam, shotgun blast to the chest, and then it's like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that. That's part of what, like, the rug literally just gets yanked out from under you about him coming in to save the day. So yeah, there's a couple of things that are, so the narrative and the plot are basically the same. But like in moments like that, there are a couple of things that are just that much more extreme in the book than they are in the film for necessary reasons. In fact, that might be a good segue into scares.
Let's do it.
So I know this is on your list, so I'm going to let you say it, and then I'm going to tell what it was in the book. So I'm just going to say one word, hobbling.
Yeah, I didn't watch it. I didn't watch it.
You didn't see it?
No. Well, I mean, I watched everything but the physical shot of the foot getting maimed, you know?
Yeah.
Just cause I don't know. There are moments where I'm like, I don't need to watch that.
I don't have that in my brain.
I've seen it once before. I know what's happening. I don't really need to see that image. So no.
Yes. So that's number one with a bullet on my scares list, but it is even worse.
Or with a sledgehammer.
Well, yeah, it is even worse in the book. I'll spare you the gory details, but I'll just say in the movie, she's got a sledgehammer. In the book, she's got an axe. I'll just leave it at that. Same.
Well,
you know what's funny? But,
you know what's funny about you saying that? Does she take both of them?
No, just one of them. She just takes one.
Well, what's funny about you saying that is, I don't know if it was iTunes or Amazon. There's cover art that has a dismembered foot in a typewriter. Have you seen this cover art?
Oh, I haven't. Wow.
And so even watching it, I remembered it purely as a sledgehammer hobbling, but then I was like, it's like my brain was trying to fabricate, wait, does she cut his foot off? Because I remembered seeing the image.
Wow.
So yeah,
she does in the book. Yeah.
Right. So whatever that cover art is, I don't know if they just transposed it from a book edition or what, but
maybe
anyway, so yeah, that makes sense.
In the book, she only takes the 1 foot, but yeah, she takes it completely off. Like he does not have a foot after she's done with him, which is so yeah, that scene's number one for my thing. And I would just say, like, the moment that she first finds out that he has killed the Misery character, her freak out scared the crap out of me. Like,
which one is that? Remind me what's physically happening.
It's the very first one where, like, she says to him, I know everything's going pretty smoothly, but then she says to him, like, oh, I'm almost at the end. I'm going to finish it tonight. I got to go and I got to see which one she's going to marry and blah, blah, blah. And then it's like nighttime. He's just dozed off to sleep, and all of a sudden he hears the door opening. She's just standing there. And when she's standing there, it's dark, and she's like, I said you were good. You're not good, and like she picks up that little chair and like, starts to, she's going to smash it. She winds up smashing it against the wall. But it is really scary because that's the first moment of, like, we've seen the swearing thing. She objected to the swearing, but then to see her reaction to Misery's death, and then that's the moment that she tells him, I never called your agent. I never called your daughter. Like, nobody knows you're here. And you better hope nothing happens to me, because if I die, you die. I mean, it is like, oh my gosh, that is a terrifying moment.
You kind of glossed over it, but I would put on the list of scares is that explosion about the profanity, because
cock-a-doodle!
Yeah, well, because up until then, something's off. Like, sure. Again, it's an accessible thriller, so clearly we're meant to anticipate something sinister, but that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think chronologically that's the first real glaring indication. Yes. Okay, we're not dealing with a full deck of cards here, you know?
That is, it definitely is, yeah.
I think one of my most, unnerving ones, was the lighter fluid on the bed. I mean,
oh yes.
When she pours it on the grill with the script, or the manuscript, and
right.
And then it's just real kind of blasé splashing it onto the bed. Like, oh my gosh, this is so nerve-wracking.
Yes, I completely agree. She is, we talked last week with Blair Witch Project about its creation of dread. she is a dread machine. Like, anytime she's in the room, it's just kind of like how tense is that moment where he's like, no, smudge the paper, it's caressable bond. It smudges. And then, like, shows her, and she still goes off on him. Like,
yes.
Oh, man, it's terrifying. Yeah, she's, again, credit to Kathy Bates' performance, but yeah, there's a lot of tension that is built into those scenes where you just are never quite sure what she's going to do next.
I've got a couple others on the scare list. Do you have more?
No, that's it for me, so go ahead.
One, I love this line in almost any other movie does not work. It just doesn't. But the context, the performance, the delivery makes it work. And that line is, my little ceramic penguin in the study always faces due south. Because you're like...
Yes.
Because in any other context, out of any other actor's mouth, that line does not work.
Yep.
Because it's such a almost Deus Ex Machina. It's like, okay, how are we going to close the gap here between her being gone and him being out for her to know? Yes. And he puts the thing back, and you're like, oh, whew, the penguin's back. And then, no, Paul, it faces due south. And it's like,
God, yes.
Oh my God, this is awful. She's a monster. Run and hide, but you can't because you're missing a foot.
Right. Oh man.
I will say I had forgotten this about the story because it's really just kind of, honestly, all it really serves in the movie, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but all it really serves in the movie is getting Buster connecting the dots. But what I wrote down is Baby Killer Annie.
Yes.
That's a pretty dark turn there. I mean, I respect the desire to motivate the character a bit, but that was
it's pretty twisted, and that's even the connective tissue that brings Buster into it. That whole conviction and
right. That's what I'm saying. I think for me, that's why I would almost say it's almost a little too much because it feels like it just serves the function of getting Buster connected to it.
I see what you mean. Yes. It feels more utilitarian. Yeah.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes. My very last one, and it legitimately made me yelp like a Paul Sheldon getting hobbled, is I had totally forgotten. So the final conflict happens in the bedroom where typewriters are on the head.
Oh yeah.
And then when he's crawling out of the room.
Oh yes.
I was not ready for her to leap back onto him. And I was like, oh
my God.
Oh God. that was rough.
Oh my gosh. That is a horrific scene. Kathy Bates was kind of upset by the violence in that scene. Like
really?
to the degree that that leading up to the filming of those shots and following them, she was kind of visibly upset. Rob Reiner, who has a tremendous reputation for a very sensitive, caring director. Anybody who's worked with him he's just generally sounds like a really good guy and is very sensitive to people's needs and their comfort levels. And so he handled her very sensitively and caringly. But yeah, she was visibly upset by having to do those scenes because of how violent they were. It's I mean, just nerve-wracking. And it's also kind of sloppy. Like the whole wrestling thing is just kind of sloppy. And you're not quite sure when he, brames her in the face with the little pig iron or whatever that is.
Right.
Yeah, because he attacks her a couple of times with a typewriter, and then he grabs that little anvil thing, whatever it is. You're not quite sure she's gone, and so then it just sort of cuts away to I guess X amount of months or years later. That's a jarring scene because you're not quite sure if it's over and done with, which I think is part of the point, because then she shows up at the restaurant as a vision of him, for him.
Right. One very last scene I want to add to the mix, because talking about the lighting the manuscript on fire scene, the dinner sequence.
Oh,
he invites her to dinner. Oh man, that is rough. Because even in my head, having seen the movie, I couldn't remember that she knocks the glass over.
Oh yeah,
and I was like, I know this is not going to be resolved here, but I can't remember how this. Oh,
There it is.
That's how.
Yep.
You know, it was like, oh man, that's painful.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, so I mean, if that's all we have in ways of scares, we can dive right into themes. What did you have by way of thematic substance?
The primary one was just always look at your weather app before you go driving. Just just don't, man. Just stay in. Stay inside.
Yes.
I know it's 1990 and weather apps are a thing of a far-flung sci-fi future, but make it happen for yourself.
Yes, indeed.
I don't know. I think that it's not like fully formed, but it is interesting. I think I probably read at some point what you made reference to earlier about King's the drug element and her being this manifestation of that. Like, I think I probably read that before, but even just watching it, what is sad and scary about this story is she's not so over the top that I don't believe this person can exist, like you were saying earlier.
Right.
So she no longer functions purely as just like metaphor, right? She's not just your brain on drugs.
Right.
So what I wrote down is just fan entitlement. And you and I have flirted with this kind of conversation over the last year a couple times. Dude, what I wrote down is Annie Wilkes is the modern internet in character form.
Yes.
She is a walking rotten tomato. She is caustic and rancorous and full of herself and ignorant and believes everything that she wants should be hers.
Yes.
And I don't know, man, that's almost what made it more terrifying is how sort of, I think I used this word last week, is how prescient it is. It's like, this is the culture we live in right now. Yes. You creator person who made that one thing did you see this? I don't watch this show at all, but Dan Harmon, who was the Community creator, which I didn't watch that either, though I've heard a lot of good things, made Rick and Morty. I think that's the name of his show.
Right. Yes.
And talk about fan entitlement here. Some idiots that occupy the dark corners of the internet, learned because Harmon celebrated that one of the primary head writers on a Rick and Morty episode was a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And the internet lost its cockadoodie mind over the people who love this show are these little basement dwellers and went nuts over the fact that it was a woman. And it's you and I talked about it during Unfriended, like just this weird misogynistic thing like, and Harmon went to town on these people.
Oh,
like,
great.
Just saying,
that's awesome.
I don't even want you watching my material. But acknowledging once it's released into the wild, I can't kind of control who is watching it. I wish I could, because these guys would have nothing to do with it. But again, it's that entitlement. It's that, it's Annie Wilkes saying, no, you don't get to do that to Misery. It's like,
Oh, exactly.
How many creative folk, and probably it's a huge percentage, who have birthed something substantive, either popcorn like Misery is in that world. It's clearly not something of deep substance creatively, but it is something that's gained him notoriety and a career and all that sort of stuff. So either on that side of the coin, or something that's real substantive and rich, gain these followers who somehow think that they can dictate what the final result is going to be.
Right.
It's just a strange world we're living in right now with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So I had a similar thing. I'm gonna take your observation about fan entitlement. I'm gonna take it one step further. But quick diversion that I don't normally do in the middle of themes. But I had no idea you were gonna bring this up, and I can't miss the opportunity. Do you know my connection to Dan Harmon?
Is this no? I don't know your connection to.
I know Dan Harmon.
No, I don't.
Dan Harmon, my friend, is in Dick Richards. Like
what?
I'm blowing your mind right now. Our audience doesn't even know what Dick Richards is, and we'll tell you some other time. But Dan Harmon...
It's in that movie Cube.
Dan Harmon and a guy named Rob Schraub started Channel 101, which is for who the creative team I was involved in that made Dick Richards. They started Channel 101, and more so friends with my buddy Morgan was the connection there. Morgan asked them if they wanted to be involved in our little short, and they said yes. And so I've actually share an IMDb credit with Dan Harmon. He would never remember
bonkers.
me. Yeah, I mean, like it's a true story. Everybody can look it up right now and see if I'm lying.
You're pretty forgettable.
But I am pretty forgettable. It's true.
No, you're not at all. I was just playing with you.
But yeah, I just couldn't. I couldn't pass up the opportunity because I hadn't
6 degrees.
I couldn't pass up the opportunity though for you bringing him up. I'm like, oh yeah, I don't have very many IMDb credits, but one of them is with Dan Harmon, so I just had to mention that. But I actually really love the story that you just told, and I didn't know it about the Rick and Morty thing. But even more so than that, so that bleeds right into what I was going to say. And I know we've already been going a little while here. We won't take too much time with this, but fan entitlement not only goes to the extent of you have to do with the story or you have to do with the material, what we say you have to do with it. But like you just mentioned about people losing their cockadoodie minds over the Rick and Morty thing, and a woman writer being part of it, is then it extends to fan entitlement, then extends to people. It then and here's what I wrote down, and this language is going to sound a little harsh, but I'm gonna back it up. It's almost as if our entitlement allows us to enslave these creatives. I'm gonna take on the persona of the rabid number one fan, that we almost sort of conscript them and enslave them in, like, you do what we want. Do you remember that so I just finished all of the series of Game of Thrones. I watched all of it, and it's wonderful, and I love it. But there's much ado about the fact that the next book, Martin hasn't written it, and he's like 2 or 3 years late, for having written it, maybe even longer than that. But, so there's a lot of fans like, hey, you got to write this. Hey, you got to get this out. And I know that a number of writers, Neil Gaiman at the top of the list, but I know a number of other writers basically came to Martin's defense. I'm not quoting them verbatim, but the basic attitude was, hey, Martin's not your puppet. Like, you know that George R.R. Martin is not your slave he's not somebody that because you've bought his books or because he is a creative mind, that he's just some dancing monkey you can then just trounce around. I use that because it's one of the most overt examples.
I don't think George R.R. Martin has danced in many a moon.
No. It has been a few. It's been a minute.
Yes, but the last winter of Winterfell.
But I was thinking about this idea, the sort of the slavery of enablement, that like because we position them. I mean, how many times have you heard, not just in the creative profession, but how many times have you heard the argument about public officials or city officials? Hey, I pay your salary. You make millions of dollars because of me. So therefore you should behave this way. Therefore you should act this way. Therefore you should do this thing. And when I was watching Misery and I hear Annie Wilkes telling Paul, hey, I feed you, I clothe you, I dress you, you're alive because of me. So essentially, because I've done these things for you that enable these other conditions, or because I've rescued you, or because I've made you possible now, I am therefore entitled to every bit of you. To your creative output, to burn the book that is this personal project for you, and then demand a book you specifically never wanted to write.
I'm gonna throw in here because I think it's gonna be relative to what you're saying and where you're going. We're kind of flirting on the fringes here. A personality you and I are both deeply affectionate of, but would perfectly fit this, is Lindelof, Damon Lindelof. At the end of Lost,
absolutely,
is a person on Twitter at that time and engages fans. And the dude had to go to therapy because the entitled fandom that were disheartened with, disheartened is too kind a phrase, who were cockadoodies about how Lost ended.
Exactly.
Because they're idiots. Just steamrolled him online, and I really think highly of him, but he's a sensitive, creative person and took it all to heart, and it really jacked him up for a number of years. Anyway, just reiterating what you're kind of going for there, I think.
I think it fits in perfectly because, like, as you already know, and I'm not I'm not trying to make this episode all about like, hey, let me tout my credentials and everything. But I've had the privilege of getting to meet Lindelof.
Wow,
I know,
it's happening.
I know.
It's happening right now.
This is where I just start the podcast from here on out is just going to be the name drops.
Right,
you know?
right.
That's all it is. I'm that guy. Side note, I'm that guy who never wants to tell these stories because nobody will believe them. Like I never want to tell these stories because people are like, no, you don't do that.
Fake
You're just
news. Fake news.
But I'm just like, no, there's photographs, there's evidence, like I'm telling the truth here. But the reason I only bring that up is because he's terribly generous. Like I'll share this one little anecdote is like, I said, I love your work, Mr. Lindelof. And I said, I'm allowed to say that, right? And he said, only if you call me Damon. Like just a very, just open-hearted, open-handed, like just, hey, yeah, you're my fans and I love you and I'm glad you love my work and all this other sort of stuff. So it's such a shame that attitude and that mindset gets just pummeled by people who feel very entitled to certain things because they invested in this creative property, they invested their time into as an audience member. So they think that, just like Annie Wilkes thinks, like, hey, no, you can't kill my Misery character. You can't do that. This is why I think the ending of the story is so perfect. It is so perfect, is because she thinks she's about to be handed everything that she wants on a silver platter, but Paul Sheldon is like, yeah, all this stuff right here, yeah, the big mysteries, the answers that you want solved, it's all right here, and then just lights it ablaze right in front of her. I think that is a absolutely perfect ending for all of that.
Sure,
Yeah, it's one of the best things I've ever written, and you'll never read a word. You'll never read it, And it's like this big breaking free. It's this big sort of like, no, I will not be that. Because here's the other side of the coin, is that we as creatives can be a little needy. And can be a little, we can want the approval a little bit. We can want the fandom. We can want the, hey, I want people to like what I'm doing. I think most creatives are like that they're kind of insecure at some roots. That's part of why they do what they do. They can put on a persona of, I just don't
you did just name drop Dan Harmon and Damon Lindelof in the span of 10 minutes, so
I'm that guy. Ask me sometime about the time I signed comic books with Walter Koenig, and then
my gosh.
And then Will Wheaton asked me for my autograph. Ask me that story.
Wow.
So sincerely, like getting back to this whole idea of like fan entitlement and that kind of stuff, like that is the thing, is that creatives kind of need that. Paul Sheldon, when he's asking her, he wants her feedback. He wants it, and she's saying like, well, there's just one thing. And then he tells her, no, what is it? Tell me, I can take it. This is before the swearing tirade. So he's like, no, I want you to tell me what you think about it. I'm trying. And we as the audience know he's trying to be a serious writer. He's trying to branch out. He's trying to expand his horizons and his credentials. And then she delivers back this just gut punch of like nitpicking him over the swearing. And it's such a pitch perfect moment, because that's the thing. The creatives, the artists want to know, like, hey, how did it make you feel? What did it make you think? What worked about it? What didn't work about it? And the fans are sitting there like, their clothes should be this. You should have cast this person. This, it should be this way. Too much swearing, too much this, not enough this. And so they're nitpicking over that other stuff, and it's a pitch perfect example of the kind of thing that just devastates a creative. It's like, man, I'm sitting here striving for this big, new, grand thing, and you're just nitpicking over the details. And I mean, this is a kind of an odd sort of theme for us to drill down on, because it doesn't necessarily feel very theologically resonant. But man, let me tell you what it makes me think of in the broader scope of things is, how many times do you see, either over the internet or in people's homes, in people's conversations, people nitpicking to death over stuff that does not matter, that couldn't matter any less, and they're just all hung up over this one little thing, like, oh, well, you know what? And so we're sitting here thinking like, hey, there are big, sweeping, grand things to be attentive to, and you're nitpicking over this.
I know you're making me think of this. This is going to seem like a random story, but that time that I met Prince, the artist. I'm just kidding. I never met Prince. I just wanted to feel like I met people story.
Met people.
No, so around the time of the first Avengers film, which isn't necessarily everybody's cup of tea, but was a real high watermark for people's expectations, and what we ended up getting was this culmination of all those solo films. It was Joss Whedon. Right. It was humorous. It was action packed. Blah blah blah. It made huge gangbusters. And I had at the time, we're not really actually in contact really anymore, but a fellow kind of comic nerd, who after seeing it was like, well, it didn't have Hank Pym and Janet. In it, Giant Man and the Wasp, and I was like, "Did you watch the movie?" Like, it was this feeling. It was such a weird feeling to me, and this is maybe before the massive level of scrutiny and microscoping we do on every single stupid thing. But I just remember thinking, like, "Oh my gosh, man, we've waited decades for a fun but serious." Well cast, well executed, well produced, organically delivered comic movie that is now doing insane numbers and is not a cynical piece of, retread material, and ends with Thanos, and you're like, yeah, but they didn't have Hank Pym. Right. I was like, oh my gosh, how is that your takeaway?
Right.
But,
exactly.
Take the theological resonance and apply that to life. It's like, look at this beautiful thing, and the Lord did this in my life, or look at that sunrise. Yeah, but it's kind of cold out here. It's like, oh my gosh, what is wrong with you?
Yeah. Well, and that's like, hey, look at these big sweeping things that are happening all around us, but you better not dare say a curse word or interpret that one Bible verse wrong, or you better not dare do any of those things, because then that suddenly becomes the conversation. And that's what's so frustrating about this idea of we as people, and I say we because you and I are guilty of it too. One thing that I'll say, we could be accused by somebody sitting there like, well, yeah, but don't you guys kind of do that whenever Batman versus Superman comes up, or don't you, isn't that kind of your thing there? I will say this: I don't have to like it. I don't have to like something. Like I don't have to like what you do, but I do think it would be wrong of me to take a generally good work. Like if I responded to it on most levels, or it was possible for me to respond to it on most levels, and then me be like, well, but they didn't do this, or they didn't do this one thing. Like anybody who would be like, yeah, Man of Steel was great until he did that one thing. I was like, well, then something might be a little off. Maybe that one thing just bothered you kind of too much, But so anymore, people want you on one side or the other. They either want you whole hog, like, hey, you love this, you invest in this, you have to adore it, you have to do this, because that's the other way fan entitlement works as well. Is it's not just on the artists, it is also on other fans of the material. Right. You have to feel a certain way. You have to be a certain thing. And that resonates as well. I know we need to wind this conversation down, so I'll say this and then I think I'll be done. That also is how people will make you feel about something that you're exploring, either personally, philosophically, theologically, or something like that. There's no inviting and engaging. It's all just like, no, it's got to be this, and if it's not this, then you're wrong, and sit down and shut up. And that's the way people treat it.
And in the spirit of that, and again, these anecdotes you can apply to broader theological application, but I've often thought for a number of years now, with the state of fandom, how there's this weird thing that I doubt the collective fandom would use this language for it, but this is how I perceive it, is, well, if it's not perfect, then it is thus garbage.
Right.
And holds no value whatsoever. And it's this weird, that's an impossible scenario. There is no thing perfect. And this is, you and I talk about this a lot, but, off the podcast for years and occasionally on it, of what is the work itself? What is the thing itself? Take that on its merits or its not merits. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not suggesting you're not allowed to scrutinize or not allowed to be discerning. What happens in entitlement mentality is that discernment isn't even part of the conversation. It's simply selfishness. It is simply me, what I want, what my expectations are. We talked about this last year with Unfriended, but And I didn't even really honestly like the movie, but the Paul Feig Ghostbusters.
Oh, right.
And the level of vitriol it got. Like,
yeah, the bile spewed at that was just absurd.
Come on.
Yeah.
You know, again,
I kind of enjoyed it. I didn't love it, but I kind of enjoyed it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if, whatever. But the point I'm trying to make isn't let's just dial in on every little piece of media and make blanket passes for it. I'm simply saying, like, there's this strange phenomena that is a thing of the spirit. Let's be honest. It is a thing of the spirit that positions you as A, an infallible authority, and B, unwilling, potentially at a point unable, to just find the good. My gosh.
Right.
And that's a scary disposition.
Yes.
You know, and you flirted with this in some of your language a minute ago, but, and you and I beat this drum often, and I think this is all connected, but this sort of binary idea of, well, are you this or are you that?
Right. Pass or fail. Right.
Yeah. Well, to be a Christian means X, Y, and Z. And these, and the X, Y, and Z in that scenario are these really strict, interpretive, cultural, traditional versions of quote unquote what it means to be a Christian.
Right.
So,
right.
You know, by certain metrics, I would probably not pass that test. By some of the metrics, Jesus Christ himself doesn't pass the test. And I think that's just where the requirement, the calling is to say, yeah, be discerning. Have an eye that sort of challenges and questions and wonders and occasionally calls out things that ought not be. But the capacity for that to be your default position,
right,
over and against the ability and the willingness and the desire. You have to desire to find good and to see good and to acknowledge good and to call a thing good. And,
exactly.
And that old video game Lemmings, I'm just picturing just this entire culture just running towards a cliff because we are just like caught up in our own entitlement, in our own rigid view, and aren't intentionally and openly and forcing ourselves to turn around and say, well, wait a minute. There is good here and there is beauty in the land. And man, we are, sorry.
Yeah.
It's just,
no. I have three real quick things to say, and then, then we should stop it because we could talk about this for 2 more hours. First thing I'll say is let's not forget we're talking about all of this sort of like, resonating it back to the theology element of it. In the narrative of the movie, Annie Wilkes says God speaks to her and tells her these things. So she invokes divine intention behind some of the things that she does, and that's terrifying. In and of itself.
I am right now willfully resisting going headline with some things that are happening in the world right now. But yes, I know. What you're saying. I could easily go down the same path. The second thing that I want to do is bring in the scripture verse that I had sort of noted for this. This is going to seem a little far afield, but then my third thing should hopefully drive it home. So Galatians 5:1 says this: "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery." Now, Paul is talking very contextually about the problem of sin, but he says, "Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery." And I think in the context of what we're talking about entitlement. Here's what I will say. I think entitlement as an attitude is slavery. And I don't just mean that you are enslaving someone else. When you feel entitled, when you feel like you deserve something simply because you want it and you feel some degree of vestment in it,
and that therefore you are entitled to that thing, I feel like you start to view people as possessions that you need to obtain and control. And I think that is a slavery mindset. That's not a free mindset.
Right.
That's a mindset where even your own decisions you are at the whim of your own desires and your own reactions to things. You can't think about something objectively. You can't get out of your own head. You are stuck in the details, and that is lunacy. That's the madhouse. And I think that if we are willing to take a step back and recognize, the verse says that, why did Christ set us free? For freedom. Which sounds circular, but it's honestly, it's like he set us free so that we could be free. Because this is this is bad. To put on a yoke of slavery for yourself is a bad thing, and that's why Christ has set us free. I think that it is one of the most subtle and deceptive acts of slavery in our culture today is this idea of entitlement, that I am owed this simply because I want this. That's very specifically what we're talking about. It's easiest to understand it in the fan celebrity culture, but it extends to other places as well. Just look at Misery through the lens of, if you listeners watch Misery with the lens of people demanding, hey, I pay your salary, I do this thing for you, I make you who you are, so therefore dance, monkey, dance. And if you view it in that, substitute any arena that you want to, that is, you yourself are putting on and burdening yourself with a yoke of slavery to take on that mindset. Rather, we must try to break free from that and recognize the inherent value and, like you were saying extensively, the inherent goodness present in the things around us. I'll end with this. I know I keep saying I'm ending. I'll end with this. I made a Facebook post not that long ago. I think I referenced this in another episode. If there's anything that I know about Christians engaging with pop culture, I've learned this. Some folks are always seeing the work of the devil, and some folks are always seeing the work of the Lord. That some people are always finding the bad, and some people are always finding the good. And I'm just going to leave that statement where it is. Some people are just framed towards finding what's wrong, and some people are just framed towards finding what's right. And if I could compel you to anything, think on what's good. Think on the things towards what is good.
Is that the advice Bill Gates gave you when y'all hung out? I mean, is that?
No, I have yet to hang out with Bill Gates. Yeah, okay. Melinda though. Yeah, Melinda.
Okay, right. I was just making fun of his. Awesome. Well, Reed, this is volume 2 of hashtag I Love the 90s, and what a good conversation. What a good year. What a good podcast we have. What a good audience we have. You guys are awesome. We really appreciate you.
We've got great listeners, and we adore you.
So getting close to the end here, we want to make sure we take some time to welcome our good friend, David S. Pumpkins, back into the conversation. David S. Pumpkins, how are you doing, my friend?
Any questions?
There you go. Thanks for helping me out there. So if you've listened to us even one episode, you probably know that we measure every movie. We rate every movie we watch on a very unique, very amazing metric of numbers of David S. Pumpkins in 3 specific categories. Those categories being style, scares, and substance. It's sort of a 0 to 5, and then we're going to aggregate them and give 1 grade of numbers of David S. Pumpkins, specifically about today, Rob Reiner's Misery. So Reed, for Misery, on the David S. Pumpkins scale, what would you give style for you?
It's an easy 4.5. I'm almost tempted to give it a 5 because I like it so much, but yeah, 4.5 sort of just more feels right. I don't even really quite know how to quantify it, but yeah, 4.5 for me.
Okay, I can dig that. I think for me, I would probably land at a 4. I love so much about it. The production value doesn't quite hold up in places, if that makes any sense.
Sure, I understand.
And so, it's got a very, as you said a little while ago, just this very kind of early 90s vibe to the production quality. So for that might ding it a little bit just in terms of holding up. So yeah, I'm going to go with a 4. For me, I will start with scares Annie Wilkes is a force of nature.
Oh, yeah.
So I think I'm going to go a solid 4 on scares for Misery.
I will see your 4 and I will call you with another 4 because I completely agree. It's like part of me also wants to give, because I love this movie, so part of me wants to sort of bump it up a little bit, but again, 4 just kind of feels right. Again, it's a little brighter, it's pretty accessible, the humor sort of offsets the fear factor a little bit, but Annie Wilkes is definitely a creepy character and one of the most compelling characters in all of King's catalog, so 4 for me as well.
Awesome. Very last category here. So we've done style, we've done scares. How about substance for you, Reed? What does this movie speak to you in terms of substance?
I'm going to land on a 4 for substance as well. I feel like knowing the metaphor that it meant to Stephen King, it'd be easy to want to bump that up a little bit, but I feel like it's a solid story, and it has a lot of thematic resonance. Not quite to that upper level where there's just a multitude of different subjects in it. It is very focused on this one or few things. So for that reason, I give it a 4.
Awesome. Like you with scares, I think I am going to see your 4 and give a 4 myself. I mean, I do think many of the movies we talk about, we extrapolate a real specific kernel from it and just kind of go running. I do think there's actually a lot going on here. And I mean, definitely King's acknowledgement of sort of the drug aspect does raise the game a good bit on what's actually going on in the film. Or
sure.
In the book and subsequently in the film. So yeah, I really think that 4 is merited, not just because of where our conversation went, but also just the film itself. So yeah, that's where I'm going to land.
Sure. All right. And so that brings us to, like last week's Blair Witch Project, maybe all of our hashtag I love the 90s films will be in this category, but we give it 8 out of 10. David
8 out of 10.
Pumpkins.
I mean, it is we are tilting the scales a little bit. I mean, these 5 weeks are 5 of the top films.
That is a good point
of a whole decade.
Yeah,
so
yeah, that is a good point.
It's gonna stand to reason they're gonna skew pretty favorable.
But all of them, slightly lesser than The Visit. Am I right?
Just a tiny bit. Awesome. Well, that is the David S. Pumpkins for Misery. Where land the plane for us, Reed.
Sure. So, well, as we say on every episode, the fear of God may be the beginning of wisdom, but it is not the end of the conversation. And if you want to continue this conversation about entitlement, about any of the, random celebrities I meet, if you want to know who else I've met, just email us at fearofgodpodcast@gmail.com and
Entitlement.
I'm teasing, of course. But yeah, you can reach out to us in a variety of ways. The easiest and best way is through Twitter. Nathan, what's our Twitter handle?
@TheFearOfGod.
You can also follow me on Twitter @ReedLackey. Nathan, where can they find you on Twitter besides The Fear of God?
@TheNathanRouse.
You can also go to morethanonelesson.com to leave a comment on this post or any of our other official episode posts. You can, as I said, email us at fearofgodpodcast@gmail.com. You can also go to Facebook, like us on Facebook, follow us there, post to us, or comment on one of our posts. And then, last but not least, if you listen to us through iTunes, we would really appreciate an iTunes review. I know this episode has gone a little longer than we normally do, and not that much longer.
It's about standard.
Yeah, any more, our episodes have kind of beefed up a little bit, but listeners, thank you so much for hanging in with us. Thank you for selecting your favorite films of the 90s. This is going to be a lot of fun. We have 3 more installments. We're going to count down next week your number 30 down to 21, which is going to be a lot of fun, and we will have yet another episode. I think you will be surprised when you see next week's episode show up in your feed. We will have yet another episode that was featured from your top 10. So Nathan, thank you as always for having this conversation, for hanging out with Annie Wilkes for a little while, creepy as she is, and thanks for just being my friend, being you.
You're welcome, and just always remember, man, I am your number 1 fan, so whatever may come.
He's got an axe right now, so I'm going to go, guys.
See you next week, you little cockadoodie folk.
See you next week, guys. Bye.